He's only 16, but prison is a real possibility for the boy charged in a stabbing spree at a Western Pennsylvania high school. The Vatican comes to America. Wyatt Spencer covers an event here in D.C. aimed at engaging modern culture and non-believers. A new generation of millennials takes on the World Bank's challenge to end extreme poverty. Jason Calvi has the story. And our Rome correspondent, Alan Holdren, reports tonight on preparations now underway for World Youth Day 2016 in Krakow. Those stories and much more just ahead on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, April 10th, 2014. Good evening with the EWTN News Nightly team. I'm Brian Patrick, and looking at news now, we are learning more tonight about a 16-year-old charged in a stabbing spree at his Pittsburgh area high school. His attorney says he wants to have a mental health expert evaluate that teen. The question remains, why did this boy launch a knife attack at school? Alex Reibel is charged with 4 counts of attempted homicide after an alleged knife attack at Franklin Regional High School near Pittsburgh.
I was just so surprised I could barely move because I got stabbed in the back.
Nathan Moore was also slashed.
He had the same emotion on his face every single day, just like a blank face, blank stare.
In all, 21 students and a security guard were stabbed and slashed.
It ended by our assistant principal tackling him.
Reibel has been jailed without bail. At a vigil service, the community tried to make sense of a violent act.
We see evil around us. Sometimes we lose the understanding that God can still be good, even when man makes a bad decision.
At least 5 students were critically wounded in the attack.
What's going through my mind? Will I survive or will I die?
The suspect's motive remains a mystery tonight. Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Today, one of the Vatican's newest programs supporting open dialogue between believers and non-believers has officially come to the United States. It's called the Courtyard of the Gentiles. This is a series of events being hosted by Georgetown University here in D.C. this week. Our Wyatt Spencer has that story.
Resonance with our tradition.
Today's panel discussion at Georgetown marks a first for the Catholic Church in the United States. The first ever Courtyard of the Gentiles in Washington, D.C. encourages open discussion between different people of faith and no faith. To kick it off, Washington's Cardinal Donald Worrell welcomed Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi of Italy, the man who created the new Vatican structure.
The relationship between diversity and identity is essential and fundamental for the sake of common good.
Cardinal Ravasi reminded the crowd that no man is an island, that all people are connected regardless of religious affiliation. Members of this morning's panel talked about how that respect for the freedom of religion is one foundation everyone can build on.
The First Amendment is still brilliant, it's still the bedrock. And that, to me, is a fundamental pillar of the common good. Even the fact that I was invited here, that the secular population is asked to partake, is really fantastic. And I think it's really wonderful.
Just outside of Gaston Hall, where they held today's panel discussion, you'll find a very large tent. To anyone walking by, it looks like a nice area for a reception, but there's some symbolism here as well. The welcoming tent dates all the way back to the biblical figure Abraham, and it's been used as a sign not only for hospitality, but also encouragement for open dialogue in the modern context for Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
That connection to the Jewish faith was one of the reasons Pope Emeritus Benedict envisioned this kind of a dialogue. Benedict made a comparison to the Court of the Gentiles, a section inside the biblical Temple of Jerusalem where Jews and non-Jews were free to ask questions and talk about God.
Any discussion of Islam in America today must begin by reminding ourselves that Islam, like any other religious tradition, exhorts its followers to be capacious, engaged, respectful and ethical with those it does not share its beliefs.
In the end, organizers say the central goal of the Courtyard is not to convert, but to open up dialogue. In Washington, Wyatt Spencer, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Wyatt. Pope Francis speaks out against human trafficking today, calling it an open wound and a scourge on the body of Christ. Francis attended a Vatican conference of church workers, charity representatives, and police chiefs from 20 nations. The Holy Father also met privately with 4 women who were trafficked and forced into prostitution. One of the Pope's priorities is combating human trafficking and slavery. The Vatican recently joined forces with Anglicans and Muslims in this effort. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner of London was at this conference. He has formed a partnership with the Westminster Archdiocese to care for victims.
The vast majority want to return home to their country of origin. 90% of the people that we help want to go home and can't, so we enable that to happen. And we help them through the court process. And charities and the church help with all of that.
I think the most poignant, one of the most poignant things that one of the victims said was, she said, "I am now free, but millions are not."
Participants to the conference pledged greater cooperation to prevent human trafficking. The conference, dubbed the Santa Marta Group after the Vatican hotel where they stayed with Pope Francis, meets again in London in November. A 3-judge panel appears to be sharply divided on a hearing challenging Utah's ban on same-sex unions. This marks the first time such a case has reached the appellate court since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the Defense of Marriage Act last year. Since then, same-sex union activities have won 8 lower court cases. Those activists are hoping this case will go to the Supreme Court and lead to same-sex unions being legalized in the U.S. A House committee votes to hold a former IRS official in contempt of Congress for refusing to answer questions at 2 hearings. Lois Lerner used to run the IRS division that processes applications for tax-exempt status. She refused to answer questions at 2 hearings about IRS agents improperly singling out Tea Party applicants for extra scrutiny. The Oversight Committee voted Thursday to hold her in contempt. Committee Chair Darrell Issa says Lerner effectively waived her Fifth Amendment right not to answer questions by providing an opening statement at the 2013 hearings. Lerner's lawyer and some Democrats on the committee disagree. Police in Florida say a man blamed for crashing into a Florida daycare has now surrendered. That crash left a little girl dead and it injured more than a dozen people, many children. Suspect Robert Alex Crachado is accused of sparking the incident when his SUV hit a convertible. The car crashed through the wall of the KinderCare building, where later parents were waiting to reunite with their children. A group of New York City men who say they were framed by a police detective decades ago want prosecutors to speed up a review of the detective's cases.
I feel violated, humiliated, most of all, I stand here today without my mother and father who died throughout my incarceration. I speak today for the voiceless, those who are illiterate, those who cannot come out of prison to speak for themselves.
The men who have been convicted of murder made the demand yesterday at a rally in New York. They claim the now retired detective Louis Scarcella fabricated evidence used to convict them.
In 4 or 5 murder cases, Scarcella used the same crack addict as his witness. This woman witnessed, Teresa Gomez, witnessed 5 murders. I mean, it's incredible. It's not to be believed.
A Brooklyn district attorney is conducting a review of several cases that Scarcella investigated. Scarcella has denied any wrongdoing. Well, one of the world's most influential economic leaders says bold action is needed to build and sustain recovery. Christine Lagarde, who heads the International Monetary Fund, says the global economy is finally turning the corner, but the recovery remains too weak. She says governments need to pursue bolder programs to spur economic growth and help the millions of people still unemployed. Finance officials are gathered here in Washington for the spring meetings of the 188-nation IMF and its sister lending agency, the World Bank. And the World Bank is issuing what could become an historic call to action. EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi was there and has the story for us tonight.
Here in the shadow of our nation's capital, signs of poverty can be found, just like in places across the world. But the World Bank is launching an ambitious plan to end extreme poverty by 2030.
The director of the hit movie Love Actually premiered this short film today, challenging young people to fight poverty. The World Bank president echoed that call to millennials, those born in the 1980s to the early 2000s.
We need a movement.
So how do we do that? Well, speakers at this rally gave some ideas: education, inspiring young business leaders, and bringing youth together.
We need to show our political leadership that we, all of us gathered here, are passionately committed to the end of extreme poverty by 2030, and that together we're willing to do our bit and hold our world leaders to account for the promises that they make.
The head of the United Nations adds,
"Speak up, Make your voices be heard to the leaders.
This speaker, Narjis Shirazi, says access to contraception would help in the fight with poverty. But Live Action's Drew Belsky disagrees.
One of the most promising ways to combat poverty is really through community, through communitarian solutions. And the most fundamental unit of a community is the family. And if there's anything that can disband a family, it's contraception, which is going to push people toward isolation, maybe toward government dependence.
In true millennial fashion, this End Poverty event wrapped up with a giant selfie featuring the crowd and two of the most powerful men in the world. In 1 year, young people will come back here to share concrete plans for how to end extreme poverty by 2030.
Now is the time to take it on.
At the World Bank in Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Jason, our own millennial. And some entertainment news. We now know who will be filling the shoes of late-night legend David Letterman. Stephen Colbert will officially take over the late-night hosting duties when Letterman retires next year. He will leave his Emmy Award-winning show, The Colbert Report, as he says, on Comedy Central for this new role. Letterman endorsed his pick today and said, "I know they wanted another guy with glasses." Coming up, plans are being made in Rome today for World Youth Day 2016 in Krakow. Alan Holdren has the story tonight. And 5 survivors of the Boston Marathon bombings nearly a year ago tell their stories in a new documentary. You're watching EWTN News Nightly. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Hundreds of thousands of young people gather every couple of years to see the Pope. Although it lasts a whole week, it's known as World Youth Day. Organizers are in Rome today, preparing for the next one in Krakow, Poland. Our Vatican correspondent Alan Holdren reports on what's in store.
Rome in spring. Rio last summer. Krakow's World Youth Day is coming up in 2016. And that's what's brought these delegates to the Eternal City today. 90 nations comparing notes on last year's experience.
I can recall the faces of the people when they saw us with the flag. This is a message for us also to keep going and being disciples for Christ in our country.
In the United States, 1 in 5 priests ordained in 2013 and 1 in 4 religious men or women who professed vows in 2013 participated in and had a good experience of a World Youth Day.
You may not think it, but what's being discussed right now in this room is going to have an effect on millions of young lives worldwide.
Work is already starting to ramp up. Part of the work that we're doing is to help the pilgrims not only learn how to prepare for this event, but how do they follow up from it? What comes next? You know, Pope Francis asked the young people to go and make a mess in their diocese, to take this noise from World Youth Day and apply it to the work they're doing. So we have to help our pilgrims not only prepare for the journey, but to come off the journey in a way that points them towards something.
The U.S. hopes to have more than 30,000 youngsters there in 2 years' time in Poland.
See you in Krakow.
À bientôt à Cracovie.
Do zobaczenia w Krakowie w 2016 roku.
Je serai à Krakow.
See you in Krakow. Alan Holdren in Rome, EWTN News Nightly.
Next week's first anniversary of the Boston Marathon's bombing is being marked with the release of a powerful new film about that fateful day, profiling 5 runners. The documentary by the Boston Globe will premiere at an advanced screening tonight. 5 Runners tells the stories of marathoners who were at the finish line when 2 bombs exploded just seconds apart.
Demi, Howard, Mary, Volker, and Brian. Do they look familiar? They should. These 5 were crossing the finish line as the first bomb exploded. Captured from every angle, they became the accidental stars of a horrific video clicked on by 50 million people. This is their story.
Darren Durlach is co-director of that for the Boston Globe. He joins us by satellite. Give us a brief outlook of how you put that together, Darren.
Basically, you know, Jeff Edgers, my co-director, wrote a story about these 5 runners. We decided to make a documentary, and he tracked down these 5 runners. We followed them for the last 6 months, documenting their stories. They each have unique stories. And then for the past month or so, we've been putting it together. And it's been a real a real satisfying project to delve into.
Can you give us a taste of the couple of the stories that are told in the documentary?
Sure, yeah. There's Mary Jenkins. She's from Central Ohio. She's probably one of the most emotionally affected runners in the race. You know, she has 2 kids. She inspects ball bearings, hundreds of ball bearings for a living at a car plant. And she's had a hard time. She has a lot of survivor's guilt. She wishes that she ran back to help. And she's one of the people who wants to get back this year the most. For whatever personal reasons, she feels like she has to be at the 2014 Boston Marathon. And then Volker Fischer. Volker Fischer is an interesting story. He lives in Chicago. He's the vice president of a pharmaceutical company. And he's this really happy, giggly guy. But one day someone forwarded him a link to a conspiracy theory that he was involved somehow in the bombings, which is just an interesting take. So each one of these runners have fascinating, compelling stories that we get into in this, and then the major plot line of them getting back to this year's marathon.
So how can viewers actually see this documentary?
So Tuesday, on the anniversary, the Boston Globe will be streaming the half-hour version, and then also on NESN on Monday, the night before. Locally, it'll be running on about 9:30, I believe.
All right, Darren Durlach, co-director of 5 Runners. We'll talk with you again on the actual anniversary. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Be sure to watch The World Over with Raymond Arroyo this week. Part 2 of Raymond's exclusive interview with Rick Warren of Saddleback Church. Why is the Vatican studying his church? Find out tonight. Plus, former member of the UK Parliament, Anne Widdecombe, reflects on the meaning of Lent in a self-centered world. The World Over Live with Raymond Arroyo tonight, right here on EWTN. And we're really excited. We're going to Rome. The Vatican Media Center is now open for journalists like us who will be covering the Easter services in Rome and the canonizations of John Paul II and Pope John the 23rd. Thousands of reporters are expected to cover those canonizations, including our EWTN News Nightly team. Be sure to tune in for our exclusive Catholic coverage. Up next, the director of Project Rachel joins us tonight to discuss healing after abortion. And it's Throwback Thursday. We'll show you a blast from the past pick of EWTN's Mother Angelica, our network's founder. On this Thursday, April 10th, this is April Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. To talk about healing after abortion, we're joined by Julia Shalava, the director of Project Rachel Ministry here in the Archdiocese of Washington. Rachel, what do you see women going through after an abortion?
Sure. After an abortion, I see women facing so much despair, so much loneliness, so much difficulty in their relationships, just a real inability to form healthy relationships and continue on in a healthy way in life. We find that in the most basic, of the relationships, and then especially within those romantic relationships. Just that difficulty to build those in a healthy way, and then that depression, that sadness, tremendous guilt that just weighs so heavily on her heart. That guilt probably grows into fear sometimes in terms of reaching out for help, but the help is out there, isn't it? Yes, it is. It is very much so out there. The fear is paralyzing. We talk about that a lot in our ministry. Our ministry is fully bilingual, and Luz, who works with me every day, we talk about that suffering in silence, many of the women. And so a lot of times it's like with any sin, the devil that uses that nature, that tendency of ours. Once we fall into sin, he's so quick to accuse us. You cannot come forth, there's no one to help you, you should have known better. The countless lies that she's thrown at. But once a woman or a man reaches out for help, what help is there? There is so much help here for those who reach out. There is a national helpline number, 888-456-HOPE. And this phone number can be channeled via area codes to the different Project Rachel ministries throughout our country.
And it's confidential.
Yes, oh yes, definitely. Confidential helpline. And so a lot of times the women are not really, and the men, are not so much seeking to go to their pastor. And so all of the priests that are in the Project Rachel network, they understand that need, and we connect them with the women who maybe it's in their same town, but it's not their parish. So they have that sense of anonymity.
During this Abortion Recovery Awareness Month, what is your hope?
Oh, my hope is that these women and men will be able to overcome that fear, that they will know that they are not alone, that this is something that there is healing for, there is hope, and that they would come out and seek that healing.
Julia Shalava with the Project Rachel Ministry here in the Archdiocese of Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, it's been 50 years since the Civil Rights era, and tonight we're reminded of one major figure from that time in an unlikely place. In this nondescript public storage unit in East Harlem sits a pile of personal belongings, a clothes rack filled with women's dresses, a brush with hair still on it.
All of these boxes right here, these large boxes on the bottom, are all of her clothing.
But the items don't belong to just anyone. They are part of Rosa Parks' legacy. Some of her most valuable possessions tucked away in boxes, unseen for the past 8 years.
These objects reflect her entire life, beginning with her birth.
From her childhood school books to the Presidential Medal of Freedom given to her by President Bill Clinton, even a hat she may have worn that day she refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus. Thousands of civil rights memorabilia ended up in the hands of an auction house after a legal squabble began between Parks' heirs and friends.
The valuable mementos are at Guernsey's in New York because the court ordered them to be there. I think they should not have been taken to begin with. You know, I feel that they were stolen, that Mrs. Parks wanted the things so that the people could see it.
Among the possessions, handwritten notes when Parks marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., items Smithsonian curator Rex Ellis says belong in a museum or research facility.
This young woman was out writing down testimony in rural places that not too many people would have gone, not too many men would have gone. And so it is that Rosa Parks that I think we need to know, and obviously these documents might help us understand.
But under a court order, the items must be sold together, and no institution or museum has come forward to pay the $8 to $10 million price tag. So, a lifetime of memorabilia from the woman known as the mother of the civil rights era remains out of the public view. So many treasures. Hopefully someday we'll all get to view them. Well, it's Thursday, and there's one popular trend you'll be seeing online today. Susie Pinto tonight introduces us to the man behind this major social media craze.
Throwback Thursday, that wildly popular hashtag on social media, has hundreds of millions of postings. But how did it all begin?
I mean, the whole reason I think I did it was because it sounded neat. It just, like, Throwback and Thursday, it worked for me.
Instagram's research team says that on February 10th in 2011, Bobby Sanders tagged this photo of toy cars with Throwback Thursday. That ignited an avalanche of people posting blasts from the past every Thursday.
Social media is insane.
Fast forward to 2014, and the 24-year-old from Woodstock, Georgia is making social media work for him. Now he's the marketing director for Brada Wheels, a high-end maker of car wheels for performance car fans.
I sit there and email all day, but our website doesn't get even as much traffic as our Instagram, as our Facebook or Flickr accounts.
One marketing expert says nobody can predict which catchy hashtags will stick.
I think it's something that can just, it's just somebody's being authentic, somebody throws something out there and it might catch on from a personal perspective. The truth is, being first isn't all that important. Having it catch on and the momentum, to me, is much more important.
Sanders is taking his claim to fame in stride.
It's something that was quirky and fun, and I mean, it is what it is, but I'm not going to walk around with that in my pocket and just throw that out at people.
Instead, Sanders keeps taking photos, saving some for a future throwback, or as it's known now, #TBT. Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
And Susie, we got in on the Throwback Thursday fun ourselves today. If you go to our Facebook or Twitter page, you'll see this image of Mother Angelica. This picture marks a really important day for EWTN, August 15th, 1981. That picture was taken. That's when Mother pulled the switch to put EWTN live on the air. Be sure to check it out and post your own pictures using the hashtag Throwback Thursday. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can catch us again anytime you like on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for watching tonight and all week. Good night and God bless.